On March 18th at Madison Square Garden in New York City, the best two middleweights in the world, Gennady Triple G Golovkin and Daniel Miracle Man Jacobs, are going head to head. This is number one versus number two in the middleweight division. It's the best matchup of the year so far in all of fight sports, not just boxing. This is a very, very important fight. All the chips are at stake in the middleweight division. I'm Michael Montero. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about this fight. This is Golovkin-Jacobs, the definitive guide. As always, we're going to get started with a little tail of the tape. And as always, my tail of the tape gives you a lot more than the average tail of the tape. Check it out. Toward the top of your screen, you'll see the typical statistics. Obviously, Daniel Jacobs is the taller, longer guy. But if you look at the arm length, pretty similar. Golovkin's about 24-inch arm length. Daniel Jacobs, 24.5 inches. So he's a little bit longer in the arms, but the arm length is similar. Still, Daniel Jacobs is going to be punching down at Gennady with more leverage. Look at the age difference. Golovkin, 34 and 11 months. He's going on 35 years old. Jacobs just turned 30. Much younger guy. Now, look at the amateur experience. We all know about Golovkin's lauded amateur record, 345-5. There are some reports that say he has at least 8 losses. He had at least 8 losses as an amateur, possibly a few more, but the official record that's out there is 345-5. Of course, he won the silver medal in the 2004 Olympics in Athens, Greece. And then you look at Daniel Jacobs, very, very respectable amateur record himself. 2-time American Golden Gloves champion. He was the American national champion, I believe, at middleweight, gold medal, and then he actually won a silver medal in the national championships as well, I think as a welterweight. If you look at their pro records, obviously Golovkin's undefeated, 36-0, 33 knockouts. He went pro in 2006, a little advanced age for him to go pro. And Jacobs, 32-1, 29 knockouts, very, very good record. He went pro in 2007. Now here's a stat that I always like to show, just to show which fighters have been a little more active recently. Golovkin fights from 2013 to present. He's had 12. This will be 13 for him against Jacobs. And then for Daniel, he's had 8. This will be 9 for him. And he had 1 in 2016. That's a big, big point, I think, in this fight. Activity is very, very important for boxers, especially boxers that utilize movement in the ring. Going back to the amateur records real quick, Golovkin beat a lot of good fighters in the amateurs. He beat Andre Durrell, Daniel Gale, Matvey Korobov, Andy Lee, Lucien Boutet, Yordanis Despine, several really good fighters. And Jacobs did as well. He beat Martin Murray, Sean Estrada, Sean Porter, and others. So both of these guys beat some good fighters before they ever turned professional. Also, with drug testing, this is something that is a bigger and bigger issue in the sport of boxing, so I felt the need to highlight it here. Golovkin, since he's owned that WBC title for a while, he's been in VADA's clean boxing program. But that is a program where the testing is dictated by the WBC. They pay for that. So whenever they want to do a test on a fighter, they contact VADA to conduct the test. But that's really a program through the WBC. The actual full VADA program, that is fight specific, and any fighter can do that, whether they're rated by the WBC or not. And Golovkin's been doing the full VADA program for each fight since he fought David Lemieux in 2015. For Daniel Jacobs, this fight against Golovkin is his first time doing full VADA testing. Now, in a minute, I'm going to look at a couple of fights, and we're going to look at some footage very, very quickly for Golovkin and Jacobs, and I'll show you some stuff that both guys do well, some things that they don't do quite as well, and what they have to do in this fight and the mistakes they can't make. But before we get to that, I just wanted to go over keys to victory real quick. And we'll start with Gennady Golovkin. I think actually for both guys here, the jab is important, obviously. And that's kind of like a boxing 101. But they're going to use the jab in a different way. For Gennady Golovkin, the jab is a pressure weapon for him. He wants to apply pressure against Jacobs, obviously. Get away from the center of the ring. Get Jacobs on the ropes, especially if you can get him in the corner on the ropes. And he's going to do that with the jab. He can't just walk in as he's done against several other fighters before. Guys he didn't really respect as far as their power, their size. Jacobs, bigger, taller guy, hits hard, does have good one-punch power when he sits down on a shot. Golovkin has to jab his way in. Obviously, Triple G has to cut off the ring. He's one of the best in the sport at doing it, but at times he can get lazy and follow fighters around. When he respects a fighter, I think he cuts the ring off better. He fights a little more intelligently. I expect him to do that against Jacobs. Jacobs is going to use a lot of movement to stay away from Golovkin. He's got to cut the ring off. And when he does cut Jacobs off, he can't headhunt. He has to throw to the body. Those body shots, Golovkin's one of the best in the business at throwing to the body, not just with the left hand, but the right hand as well. I'll show some of that later. But that's what's going to slow down Jacobs' movement, right? Also, Jacobs at times will keep a high guard, especially if Golovkin starts to go upstairs. He needs to punch around Jacobs' guard. Particularly, Jacobs likes to have a high guard with the right hand. He drops his left hand a lot, but he gets up high with the right hand. Golovkin has to target that with his left hook, punch behind it, go around it. Sometimes Golovkin could even do a sort of downward hook where he comes over and flips it. A lot of guys throw a hook like this, that's textbook. Golovkin will sometimes come over, use his shoulder and come down with the fist turned over. I think he can land that shot against Jacobs around that high guard he keeps with his right hand. And lastly, and I think this is going to be a key to this fight, and it's something that I would be working on in camp if I'm Abel Sanchez and Team Golovkin, hit Jacobs as he moves out. When Jacobs is caught on the ropes a lot of times, he doesn't clinch. He likes to slide out to either side. And I think that there's a big opportunity for Golovkin to hit Jacobs as he's sliding out with a looping punch. And we'll talk more about that in a second. I'll show you some video of when he did that against Martin Murray, who of all of Golovkin's opponents has a similar body size. Not the same fighting style exactly, but the similar size, actual length and height and everything. Now, keys to victory for Danny Jacobs. Okay, jab, of course, we're going to start there. Boxing 101, right? But unlike Golovkin, Daniel Jacobs' jab isn't a stalking kind of jab to apply pressure, but it's to set and maintain distance. That's what his jab's going to be in this fight, a rangefinder. It's not to push Golovkin back necessarily, it's to keep him off. It's a stick. That's literally going to be what Jacobs needs to do with the jab, is just have a stick out in front of him and keep Golovkin off of him. Also, he's got to keep this fight in the center of the ring. Daniel Jacobs cannot let himself get caught up on the ropes and let Golovkin tee off on him, even if he keeps a high guard, because shots will slip in. Golovkin will be able to get between the guard and land uppercuts. The shorter man usually can land uppercuts on the inside like that. As I said a second ago, Golovkin can go around the guard. Daniel Jacobs has to keep this fight in the center of the ring and utilize his movement to keep Golovkin off balance. Use his angles, and I believe his faster feet, to keep turning Golovkin and keep him off. And I'll show some video of that later, how he was able to do that in spots against Dmitry Pirog in their fight a few years back. Also, when Golovkin does get close, when he does cut the ring off, and Golovkin seems to get better at that in fights as the rounds wear on. He seems to get more and more warmed up as he figures his man out. When Triple G gets in on him, Daniel Jacobs has to clinch. He has to clinch. So many Golovkin opponents get stunned, and they're kind of like a deer in headlights, and they stop clinching. And Jacobs, the one fight he lost against Dmitry Pirog, again, which I'll show a little bit of in a second, he stopped holding. He didn't hold when he needed to, and he got caught. And that's something Jacobs has done in other fights against even Sergio Mora, when he's gotten knocked down, when he's just been buzzed before. He has to clinch in this fight. I know a lot of fans don't want to hear that because it's going to make the fight boring, but that's one of the biggest keys to victory for Danny Jacobs. Clinch and make the fight boring. When he clinches, use his height, his size, lean on Golovkin and wear him down. Get him tired so in those late rounds, those thudding punches from Golovkin don't have quite as much steam on them. Last but not least, Daniel Jacobs has to get Golovkin's respect. He has to keep him honest. He doesn't have to sit down on every shot. He should not go for the knockout. He should be planning for 12 rounds. Jacobs needs to plan to win a decision in this fight, not go for the knockout. But every now and then, he's got to put some stank on a shot. He's got to put his ass into a shot and get Gennady's respect. If he doesn't do that, Golovkin's just going to stalk and walk through him like he does with every opponent. But I do believe Jacobs has the power, the speed, the skill to hit Gennady and stun him and actually push him back if he's willing to sit down on a punch every now and then. He can pity-pat with the jab. He can pity-pat with some combinations to maintain distance. But every third, fourth, fifth punch has to have some heat on it to keep Golovkin honest. One great thing about this fight is that both men are facing their best opponent to date as a pro. When you look at Golovkin's best wins, and he's got a few top-rated, top 10 rated wins as far as middleweights he's beat so far on his ledger. But when I try to look at guys that he's defeated, that he's fought, that resemble Daniel Jacobs, there really isn't one. When you think a little bit of the style of Kasim Uma, when, of course, Kasim Uma was a southpaw, but Daniel Jacobs can switch up southpaw. He's done that before in the past, and he can be successful at it. But just some of the movement is somewhat similar to Uma, a little bit. Style-wise, not very similar, but Uma was able to give Golovkin problems in their fight, probably give him his toughest fight as a pro, top to bottom, and took Golovkin late. I think that Jacobs can do some of the things Uma did, but that style just doesn't, the comparison doesn't work for me. Same thing can be said with Kell Brook. Kell Brook is an elite level talent, I believe, but he was undersized. Daniel Jacobs doesn't quite fight like him. He's bigger. I think of all the fighters, and of course there's a hybrid here, but of all the fighters that Golovkin has faced, Martin Murray is the best example I can think of a guy who has the same height. He's 6 feet tall. He has a 73-inch reach. He's going to pose the same example of where Golovkin should place his punches. So I'm going to show some footage from their fight in 2015 in a second. Jacobs is kind of a hybrid of all the fighters I mentioned, but again, size-wise, most like Murray, I think. So that's going to be the most applicable comparison. Now, on the other side with Jacobs, he's fought no one that's exactly like Golovkin, but of all the fighters he's faced, the absolute best he's fought is Dmitry Pirog. And it should be noted that, of course, we know how that fight ended, but that was not a 100% version of Danny Jacobs. His grandmother died just before that fight, and she practically raised him. That was a devastating blow for him. He had some family issues, was dealing with a lot, did not come into the ring 100% into that fight. But still, even though he lost that fight, I think it serves as a good example of what not to do against Golovkin. But he had moments in that fight where he did very well. He won several rounds in that fight. We're going to show some examples. He controlled some rounds with his jab and his movement. And although Pirog doesn't really fight exactly like Golovkin, I think he's most applicable. Pirog is longer, taller, definitely better, I think, better head and upper body movement than Gennady Golovkin, honestly. But the stalking, the pressure that Pirog fought with, that's very similar to Golovkin's style. Pirog also had 200-plus amateur fights. And what's interesting is he was slated to face Gennady Golovkin. Nobody wanted to fight Pirog, right? After he beat Jacobs. Golovkin was slated to face him, ruptured his back, and a disc in his back, and that sent him into retirement. Another reason why I like the Pirog comparison for Jacobs when we're talking about Golovkin, 24-inch arm length as well. So I think there's a lot there to compare. We're going to show some footage from that fight. In fact, let's get into the Daniel Jacobs, Dmitry Pirog fight. This goes back several years, and I just wanted to show a little bit of footage here from the second round. This is bad Danny Jacobs. This is where he basically, he's not using his jab to keep Pirog at bay. He's backing himself into the ropes, and he lets himself get clipped with a hard right hand that I think knocked him down. Almost knocked him down, and if it did put him down, the referee missed it. Either way, it was a big scoring blow, and it changed the fight. Right there. You see, he tried to clinch there, but he didn't clinch. He just backed up, and he's letting Pirog get right back on top of him. Just ate a body shot there, did not clinch. Now he's laying back on the ropes, letting Pirog do what he wants to do. That's an example of what Jacobs cannot, absolutely cannot do against Gennady Golovkin. First of all, didn't have his hands up, wasn't jabbing, wasn't keeping his opponent at bay. When he did get tagged, he simply ran. He didn't clinch. He's got to hold against Golovkin when he gets close. Now, here's a segment in the third round, which Jacobs won on all three scorecards, where he uses movement. He's not landing a lot of punches, but he's getting a few in there, here and there, to keep Pirog honest, and he's making Pirog miss and expend a lot of energy. See, even though those shots didn't land for Jacobs, right there, a few of those jabs landed, but it kept Pirog at distance. He's using movement here. He made Pirog miss. Good jab to the body. None of that's landing from Pirog. Made him miss twice there. Keeping it in the center of the ring. Spinning him. This is what Danny Jacobs needs to do against Gennady Golovkin. And the thing with that shot, Pirog took it very, very well because he had proper balance. If you look at that shot again in slow motion, you'll see that Pirog, his balance there, he didn't sell out when he shot his punch, so he had his balance on his back foot, so he was able to eat that right hand. But it serves as an example. If Jacobs can do that to Golovkin, and Golovkin can be hit, I think he could be hit easier than Pirog could be hit. I think Jacobs could land right hands like that. If he could get Golovkin to extend himself, use those angles to keep him a little off balance, he can shoot a right hand like that and score. And I think he can win rounds that way. Now here's a quick shot of the knockout in the fifth round. And I only want to show this because, again, it serves as an example of what Daniel Jacobs cannot do. You'll see in this sequence that he's simply moving straight backwards. And he has his right hand up, but his left hand's down around his waist. No head movement at all. And Pirog shifts before he shoots the right hand over the top. And that's something that Gennady Golovkin is very, very good at. Probably not as fast as Pirog with his feet and everything else, but very, very efficient. And Golovkin hits a lot harder than Pirog. He's much stronger than Pirog was. So this is the type of activity that Daniel Jacobs has to avoid against Triple G. Straight back, left hand down, boom. That's just textbook. Cannot do that against a guy that's coming with all that power. Okay, now we're going to switch over to when Golovkin fought Martin Murray. And we're going to start in the first two rounds, just a couple of sections from the first two rounds where Martin Murray had some success. So let's check out the footage. Okay, now I'm about to show you the first knockdown in the fourth round of this fight. And I think it's very, very telling. And I think this is a punch that Golovkin can absolutely land against Danny Jacobs. Martin Murray's going to let himself get stuck on the ropes with a very, very high guard. And he's going to slide out to his left, to Gennady's right. Gennady's going to time it. He's going to throw a combination, but he's going to catch him with a right hook, a looping right hook. Not very orthodox punch, but it's one that Golovkin does well as Murray's sliding out. He catches him right in the breadbasket, right under the rib cage, and Martin Murray goes down. This is absolutely a punch that I think Golovkin can land against Danny Jacobs if he tries to simply slide out without spinning. If he tries to just slide out sideways on the ropes, Golovkin can land this shot and change the fight. Now we're going to see another example of this sort of in the 10th round of that fight, When Martin Murray is spinning out, he's back on the ropes again. He's spinning out, this time I think to his right, and he's doing so with his hands down. And Golovkin's going to spin with him and simply come over the top with a right hand, nail him right on the head. I think, again, this is a punch that he can hit Jacobs with if he's lazy getting off the ropes in their fight. If Daniel Jacobs does that, it doesn't matter how fast or athletic you are, especially late in the fight after Golovkin's been stalking you and putting so much pressure on you, I think he can land a shot like that and change this fight. What I like in this fight with Murray is that Golovkin went for shots like that to the body first, and then later in the fight, he started headhunting. You chop down the tree, the taller fighter, by going downstairs first, then upstairs, and that's what Golovkin's got to do against Jacobs, who, let's face it, is a better fighter than Martin Murray. Moves faster. I think he's more athletic. His feet are faster. His hands are faster. His angles are better. So when he's spinning out, he's going to be a little faster than Murray when he was doing it. But Golovkin can time that. And then I'm going to show you here in the 11th round. This is just more of the same. This is just Golovkin full steam ahead right here. I predict a stoppage like this in the fight with Daniel Jacobs. My official prediction here is I think that Jacobs will have some success early on. I think he might even buzz or hurt Golovkin. I wouldn't be shocked. I'm saying it right now. I wouldn't even be shocked to see Golovkin possibly dropped early in this fight. I know that sounds nuts. I'm not calling it. That's not my prediction. I'm just saying I think Jacobs has the burst speed kind of power to catch Golovkin off balance and score a flash knockdown. I don't think he's going to hurt Golovkin with it, but I do think he has enough respect or enough skill to get Golovkin's respect early on and buzz him and possibly score a flash knockdown. But I see Golovkin eventually wearing Jacobs down, chopping down the tree, starting downstairs, going upstairs, fighting smart the way he did against David Lemieux. And I would have talked about David Lemieux in this breakdown, but Lemieux is 5'9". Jacobs is just a taller, longer guy. But I think that Golovkin's going to score an accumulation type stoppage the way he did against Martin Murray after scoring several knockdowns, where either the ref stops it or the corner throws in a towel. That's my official prediction. Golovkin by late TKO to become the middleweight champion of the world. Canelo weight doesn't matter. This is for the middleweight championship. I can't wait. I'm going to be ringside. I'll see you guys there. I'm Michael Montero. I'll see you at the fights.